name is Laura Dawson, and I'm the North America lead for the AWS Institute. 2021 has been a big year for space issues and innovation. Between private space travel, government-led missions, and the emerging space economy, we are clearly on the verge of something big. We spoke with Peter Marquez, AWS Head of Space Policy, to understand some of the evolving issues around sustainability, data protection, and how AWS is innovating for customers to make the future of space a reality. Peter, can you give us an overview of human activity in space today?
There's a wide number of things going on. Everything from the commercial activities that we've seen with Blue Origin and SpaceX and Virgin Galactic and those activities, to what we consider some of the more traditional functions going from NASA or JAXA, the Chinese National Space Agency now, and ESA and other space agencies. So just to really quickly go through some of them in areas where I think that are beneficial that maybe people may not know about. It covers the range from agriculture to life sciences to land management and resources. And some examples in there are, there are companies that are working on actually 3D printing human organs and using the International Space Station to work through that, because some of these cells that would be needed for a liver or something else tend to form a matrix much better in a zero gravity environment. So maybe it'll get to a point someday where you can order a new liver and have it shipped from the International Space Station. And then we're also doing work on agriculture. So working on growing things in space to see what different opportunities there are for hybrids, and how things growing in a zero gravity environment may actually help increase crop yield down here on Earth. And as we look towards the future, as we talk about having a sustained presence on the moon, a sustained presence on Mars, how do we create the foodstuffs, the food and water necessary for people to live in those places? And all those technologies all actually come back and have a return on investment for those of us down here on Earth. So it's a really exciting time because there's so many different things going on with so many different people and so many organizations that are not just NASA anymore. So it's a really fun time to be doing this.
Can you tell us more about freshwater and resource management?
Freshwater, obviously, if you're on a space station and you're not sending up water all the time, you need to find ways to recycle the water that you have. And I think the phrase the astronauts use is, yesterday's water is today's coffee. And I won't draw the rest of the math out there for how that equation works, but I'm sure you can figure it out. So it's not only managing the fresh water you have now, but how do you effectively manage the water resources that you have, which in those sorts of environment are finite. And as we have more and more people on the earth with more and more needs and manufacturing increases and agricultural demands increase, how are we better managing those water resources and being able to recycle and reuse fresh water? And that's one of the things that the space community has been at the forefront of, just because it's a requirement, it's a demand. Back a few years ago, it was $10,000, $20,000 to send 1 pound of material up. So it's a $20,000 can of Coke to send that up. So if you're going to send water up, it's a fairly expensive activity. So there has been a lot of work done on how do we maintain the resources we have for water. And then the other thing I would say as well is, from space, we're actually able to do resource management. So we can find out where water is that we haven't found before. But more importantly, on the agriculture side, we use space resources, we use satellites to help with agriculture and precision agriculture so that we're not wasting water. We can actually see how much water is being used on farmland and then precisely irrigate where we need to irrigate and therefore save the water that is available. Again, it's one of those areas where space, people may not immediately think, well, it's way up there, it doesn't affect me. You can go to the grocery store every day and eat something and have no idea that space supported that, but it does.
What is space debris? Why is it a challenge?
Space debris is an interesting one because when you think about space and you think about the orbits and all the area above the Earth, it is enormous. It is an enormous vastness. And so you would think, well, one screw here or, a piece of rocket debris here, you're talking, an inch, centimeters in this vastness of space. It doesn't really matter. But if you think about it more like roads, there's only certain orbits and certain altitudes that are ideal for doing certain operations in space, whether that is Earth imaging, things like GPS, communication satellites. So those particular highways have a lot of traffic on them. And so if there is road debris, it's no different than if you're going down the highway at, well, I think the speed limit's 65, but if you live in DC like I do, it's a suggestion. So if you're going down the Beltway at 85 miles an hour and all of a sudden there's a tire in the middle lane, that's going to cause a problem. It's going to slow up traffic, and you can't slow things down in space. There's no putting on the brakes. Well, there is, but that leads you to a problem that you're going to actually either deorbit your satellite or bump into something else. So as we talk about these highways and debris being on them, we've been looking at how do you track that? How do you determine ways to prevent those types of issues? How do you maybe do predictive analysis using AI and machine learning to figure out, well, okay, this happened to this satellite on this pass, what may happen on the next one, or one that's going to happen 1 year from now, and start to model those things out. So again, space is vast, but the key areas and main arteries are areas where we need to be concerned because, again, as I've mentioned in some of the previous comments, billions of dollars of capability are up there in space, and trillions of dollars worth of commerce and agriculture and just modern life is sustained through objects in space. And if we can't protect those and can't make sure that we're still able to use the space environment, well, that's going to be a real rough day for the rest of us here on Earth.
Are there laws or treaties that can help?
Right, so there are a few mechanisms that we already utilize here in the U.S. and along with other international partners. So there is a agreement on debris and rulemaking on debris on how you create and govern and regulate what your companies and what governments are going to do in space. So for instance, the U.S. has regulations on how much, is when you launch, is your rocket going to cause debris? When your satellite deploys, will it cause debris? When your satellite reaches end of life, is there a way to deorbit it or make sure it's out of the way? All these go into actually creating a license and making sure you're doing the right things in space. And several other countries are also members of this framework. So we're doing things from that standpoint, but then there's still accidents. I mean, nobody goes up there trying to create a problem. And so there are still accidents that happen and things that fall off of satellites, or a paint fleck or whatever else that comes off of something that you just can't really plan for. And so we work, and I would say at AWS, we work with a number of companies that help track what is happening in space. They help identify things. So a company like Leo Labs, which runs radar satellites, they are able to track a huge number of objects in space and see where they are. We work with another company called Slingshot, which is they have a user interface that sits on your desktop that can tell you what is happening in space, where your satellites are, where other things are, where debris is. So you can get a full real-time picture of, hey, I got a problem coming up in about a half an hour. I may need to move my satellite a little bit. So we're working with a lot of these companies to make sure that we are keeping a database of what is up there, helping other customers avoid those problems on the road, and helping to try to provide predictive analysis of what is going to happen to make sure that problems don't become worse.
Why is AWS concerned about sustainability in space?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It would not be readily apparent as to why a quote cloud company would care about space sustainability and what happens in space. But I think the main reason is that for the most part, for now, the majority of space users and space customers are on the ground, with 6 billion people on the ground versus a dozen or so at most at a time in space. A large percentage of customers and users of space are on the ground. And what those customers and users are using is data. It is data of images, of what is happening for agriculture or for fishing or for maritime domain awareness and shipping. It is navigation like you get from GPS. It is a variety of things that are all data driven. And so for us, we are in the business of data. And if that data is not flowing, then there's a problem. It's hindering somebody's ability to to trade. It's hindering somebody's ability to farm, to navigate, to do these things. And so it's very important for us that we keep the data moving and that we keep the flow of information going to those customers on the ground that desperately need it. And that's why AWS cares about space sustainability.
How is AWS working with space customers to keep data secure?
So space cybersecurity, space cyber hygiene has been something that I think we've intuitively known in the space community that we needed to be concerned about. But it was one of those things that it's a problem, but hasn't really been a problem, so let's ignore it. I think a lot of that has changed in the past few years for two main reasons. One is that so much of humanity's quality of life rides on space capabilities, that it's become a critical piece of infrastructure. And the other part is that we actually have seen people conduct cyber attacks against satellites. So we've woken up to a reality that we've known, or at least finally made it a priority, that we need to protect these assets in space. And just recently, the U.S. government put out a presidential directive saying that the U.S. government needs to focus on space cybersecurity and needs to work with industry on enhancing space cybersecurity. So, for example, AWS and many other companies are working with DHS and working with the U.S. government to enhance our cybersecurity in space. And we've been doing the same thing with a lot of other countries who have space assets. And so to your point, data that is coming to and from a satellite is a vulnerable point. Data that is coming to a ground station and residing at the ground station is vulnerable. So we've been working very hard with some of our customers to make sure that they can have secure communications and then apply all the things that AWS already does for data security. I'm sure people who have heard other AWS leaders talk about what we do, you'll hear it from Andy Jassy or Adam or anybody else. Security is always job number one at AWS. And so that same thing applies to our space portfolio. We have to make sure that data is secure. And so we're applying some of our same capabilities to the space community to support what our space customers need.
Finally, Peter, why is AWS a great partner for space cybersecurity?
We're bringing what we already know how to do and do well and helping apply it to the space community to help shore up those concerns and those vulnerabilities in the space area. So again, for us, everything from data links from the satellite to the ground, to data at rest on the ground, data at transit, all the things that AWS knows how to do, we're able to bring and help our space community out. And that's been one of the things that really, for me, coming to AWS was an important thing. I've been here a year, and that was really one of the reasons I came, was because I saw a real opportunity for us to do good things in a community that really needed our support. So I look forward to what we can do, not just in the US, but all over the world for enhancing space and cybersecurity.